3, come on. Hey, there we go. ¿Qué pasó, cochinos and sucias? I'm that vato gallo. Welcome to another episode of Sucias Are My Favorite. Now, this episode is about first and second generation immigrants, specifically Latinos. It kind of goes back to the issue I had, or not an issue, but a episode that I recently did. Came out Thursday, right? And I was on a friend's episode. We were talking about animosity between U.S.-born Latinos and U.S.-born Latinos and Latin American-born Latinos, and it kind of reminded me of kind of an issue that that's been in my family for a while, first generation type stuff, and I'm gonna get into that as well. This attire that you can see on YouTube, not on the podcast, is basically a sarape robe. My sleep schedule is crap, so you probably didn't listen to the original episode, just talking about myself, but I broke my hip several years ago, or not broke, but I separated it. In case you didn't know, your hip is a lot of parts. It's 3 bones. It's 2 major bones on the side where your legs kind of socket into, and then they connect to each other with cartilage and connect to your spine. Now, traditionally on the front side, you have that pubic bone right above your pubic area. That's a bone that kind of connects it to, and that usually pops open whenever a woman gives birth or whenever she's adjusting to be able to push a kid out. But yeah, the cartilage can separate. But mine, however, separated completely from each other. One side of my hip was tucked into my rib cage. The other side was loose. All kinds of recovery. So since then, I've only managed to get an average of about 5 hours of sleep per week. Not per night, per week. Now that I've been living in Nevada, I have been more open to trying cannabis, in particular CBD and CBN, edibles, tinctures, stuff like that. The CBD blocks the pain, and the CBN just puts me to sleep. So now I'm averaging 4 to 5 hours a night, sometimes 6, if I take a lot. But my tolerance for the edibles and stuff that I've taken is kind of increased. So a couple of days ago, I just took myself completely off. So instead of eating half an edible of each or half a dose of each, now I'm up to double dosage. So I want to wean myself off so that way half the dosage is effective again, because that stuff gets expensive. In any case, so the reason for this is I just basically woke up from a nap because my body decided you need a nap. You haven't been sleeping for a couple of days now. That's why my podcast went out late last night. I was editing it and the recorded version of being on a friend's episode and mixing it all together, trying to make everything kind of cohesive. So that's this. In any case, the purpose of this episode, or the topic, is first and second generation immigrants, particularly Latino immigrants. I'm sure similar issues take place or are also prevalent in other nationalities and ethnicities, but I can only speak to what I know. Unless you want to jump on and you're first or second or third generation, you want to jump in and chime in, be glad to have you. In any case, on my father's side of the family, I am second generation. On my mother's side of the family, I am first generation immigrant. Child of an immigrant, right? So on my father's side, I'm also the youngest of all of my cousins. Most of my cousins are very early Gen Xers. A couple of them are late boomers. My father and his siblings are the silent generation. So they didn't have kids until, when they had kids, their kids were either boomers or Gen Xers, depending on when they had them, right? So actually, most of my cousins, I want to say, are boomers. I'm probably one of 5 or 6 that are Gen Xers. In any case, I got to sit down and do the math and see when everyone was born. But I am the youngest, but still a Gen X. My cousin's kids are, which I don't even know, I've always grown up calling them my second cousins, but then there's a first cousin once removed, second cousin twice removed. I don't know the hierarchy of that shit. Just, they're my cousin's kids. But in our family, or at least on my father's side of the family, if hierarchically I am higher, so basically my cousins are on this level, and my cousins' kids are this level, even though they're older. Like some of them are actually older than me, but they're lower on the hierarchy scale of things. Like if you were, I'm thinking more of like heir to a throne. So, at the top would be the grandfather, the kids, the grandkids, and the grandkids, which are my cousin's kids, right? Well, any case, in our family, because I'm higher up hierarchically, my cousin's kids tend to call me Theo, even though they're my age or older, or mostly my older. Yeah, it's weird. Whatever. Specifically to the immigrant stuff, most first generation kids have a problem in school or just in general because, or let me talk about my father's side, because that's the issue that I see is most common or most prevalent with first generation kids, first and second generation. So my aunts and my father were first generation, and they went to school, and this is way back in the 40s. Yeah, because he was. Yeah, it would have been in the 40s when they were going to school, and there was a lot of animosity. Latinos, Mexicans were seen as just a little bit more, or less than a white person, and just a hair over more than blacks, but still lumped in as a lower class citizen, depending on how you were seen. There was often times that my father and his siblings would get sent to drink from the colored fountain or go to the colored door to the colored restrooms because they were darker skinned, they were darker skinned than white people or Caucasians, but they were still fairer skinned than blacks, the average black person. Now, on top of that, most of my aunts and my father didn't speak English when they went to school because my grandparents only spoke Spanish at home. They had no reason to learn Spanish because their community was Mexican. So they only spoke English whenever they had to deal with white people, whenever they went out and about and, dealt with them. However, my grandfather did end up learning English and was fluent, had a job with Exxon, did a lot of stuff there. And one story that my father shared with me sticks out, and I see my father's point of view, and I'll just share that story. So, my grandfather takes my father and one of my aunts to a drive up. So it was kind of like a Sonic. Most burger joints back then were like Sonics, where you just kind of pull up and someone comes out to serve you, or you go to the door, or go to a window, ask for your food, and they bring it out to you, or you pick it up. Well, in these places, some of them also had a colored window or a colored order sign. My grandfather gives them a quarter to buy all three of them hamburgers and sodas. So they go up to the counter. Guy comes out, points to them, and points to around the corner. So they start going around the corner because they're going to the colored window to order. When my grandfather sees that, he yells at my father and aunt to come back to the truck. So they go back to the truck, hey, and of course they were raised that, they do whatever an adult tells them to. This was back in the day when another adult, if they saw a kid misbehave, they could beat that child, drag them to their parents' house and tell them, hey, I beat your kid because he did this in public. And then the kid would get another beating because either they embarrassed the parent because someone else had to correct their child, or they would beat the kid just for, hey, in case you didn't learn your lesson the first time or the second time, right? So they were raised to whatever an adult tells them, you do it. So they went around the corner because an adult told them to. They got called back by their father, my grandfather, and he got after them. Like, hey, what are you doing? My father explains, hey, the man told us that we need to go to the other window to put an order in. My grandfather, according to my father, was livid. He was yelling and cursing up a storm. Hey, you don't do that, blah, blah, blah. Not even the president of the United States speaks two languages. You do. So don't you ever let another person tell you that you're less than them. Fuck them, right? So that's the gist of that story, is that speaking two languages makes you more or worth more than the average person that only speaks one. And not to let someone else tell you that you're less than. My father got the moral of the story. My aunt, on the other hand, chimed in and said, so does that mean we're not getting burgers? And that's been the running joke in the family, or one of the running jokes in the family. And apparently that mindset stuck with my aunts, but not with my father, which is a good thing on my end. For my cousins, not so much, because my cousins on my father's side, I'm trying to do math in my head. I'm trying to do like percentage wise, but I roughly have about 20 cousins, 21 cousins. Some of them have died, but about 20 cousins. And of those cousins, only 3 are fluent in Spanish. I'm one of those 3. The reason for that is because of that, well, not only that experience that my aunt had, but also in school, because when they went to school, they didn't know English. So they had to learn English before they could even do classwork. And some of them were held behind because they weren't picking up English so well. And back then, there wasn't ESL, English as a second language. Back then, it was just learn English or fail. That was it. So other classmates would make fun of them because of their accents. They would have an accent when they would speak English. So it was the accent, the making fun of. Oh, and then also ridiculing them for, excuse me, also ridiculing my aunts for the food they ate, because most of the kids there, they would have sandwiches, they would have American type leftovers, while on the other hand, my father and aunts would always have tacos or some other Mexican food that would be their lunch. And so of course it wasn't like, ooh, what's that? It was like, ew, what's wrong with you? They were they were seen as less than, that they weren't eating human food. One of my aunts shared a story that was basically they were made fun of for the food they ate, and apparently their dogs, because their food, whatever it was that they ate, which I'm thinking was carne guisada, looked like dog food. So that stuck with my aunts, and so when they raised their kids, they did not teach their kids any Spanish at all. And they essentially Anglicanized their kids, made them as white as possible so they didn't learn Spanish. They only ate mostly white cuisine. The only time they had Mexican food was whenever they would go visit my grandmother. So that is where my cousins ended up getting stuck, is that they didn't learn Spanish, not because they didn't care to know, or they also didn't know they could learn Spanish because their parents didn't speak it to them, other than getting yelled at, or whenever their parents were having secrets or talking amongst themselves that they didn't want the kids to know what they were talking about. So they kind of half-ass understood Spanish and knew how to pronounce words, like sit down, shut up, siéntate, cállate, come tu comida, stuff like that. But as far as having a conversation, they didn't learn how to do that. So my father's mindset was like, hey, you're going to learn 2 languages, you're going to be worth more than the average person. My mother, on the other hand, I was first generation with her. So I was essentially on the same level as my father, as going to school and learning things. However, I did grow up learning English, but we did speak Spanish at home. And I was also having to write at least 1 letter a month to my 2 aunts and my grandmother in Mexico. And that would help me practice writing Spanish as well as speaking Spanish, because my mom would keep me in, I guess not in check, but keep me in practice throughout the year. So when I went to Mexico in the summer, I wasn't relearning Spanish all over again. I was still kind of fresh in my mind. And another thing that my mother wouldn't allow, like I would get a spanking for mixing Spanish and English. Like I wasn't allowed to speak Spanglish. I either spoke English or I spoke Spanish. I wasn't allowed to use Spanish slang either. So I couldn't say, oh yeah, voy a parquear la troca on the corner. I'm going to park the truck on the corner, which park and troca, or parquear and troca, are Spanglish slang, versus voy a estacionar la camioneta en la esquina, which is a proper way of saying that. I'm going to park the truck on the corner. So that helped me in terms of being able to do well in school in Mexico, but it didn't help me to be able to make or keep friends in Mexico, because I was seen as weird. I was seen as like a nerd because I spoke properly. I didn't know any slang. I I only knew a couple of slang words like cool, awesome, badass, but not understanding slang like we would have today. I got to dip out, or stuff like that. I would have no clue. I could probably get from context clues, but for the most part, no idea. Hang on. So, on my mother's side, I ended up growing up learning and knowing Spanish, and my cousins on my father's side envied me for that, and also had a little animosity towards their parents, my aunts, because they didn't learn Spanish at home. So they had to learn Spanish on their own, either in high school, if they were lucky to think about learning it and getting help from home, or they would have to learn on their own once they graduated. I have a cousin that's not a big deal, but he is an attorney. He does well. He lives in a high rise in Houston, and he had to learn Spanish as an adult, and only because he had clients coming in speaking Spanish, and his name is very Hispanic. So first and last name would be like Juan Garcia, right? Very Hispanic, very ethnic, but spoke no Spanish. So his clients would kind of look at him weird, like, "Hey, you don't speak Spanish. I'm not speaking. I don't understand you very well." So there was that lack of communication, and saved him from having to hire a translator. The issues that they had growing up was still kind of similar in that they were made fun of. My cousins were made fun of growing up because they didn't speak Spanish, because they grew up in Latino neighborhoods that most of the other classmates were most of the classmates were first generation, so they spoke Spanish and English, and they were quicker at learning English because they were allowed to watch TV at home, Sesame Street, all that kind of stuff, so they practiced and learned English and spoke it better, and the animosity was more of them, not my cousins, not knowing the Spanish or not learning Spanish, and their friends and classmates knowing both. And so that polarized some of my cousins to be even more Anglo. So instead of using their names as Juan Garcia, they would go by John. I can't think of an Anglicized name, but they would make their names as white or whiter than what they were. So it's kind of a loss, because whenever they go to trips, they often try to go to Mexico, which I find amusing, is they go down to Mexico and they still have the same communication barrier that they would as an Anglo or American, right? Typical American, gringo. And there's so many, facets or issues that they had to grow up with that I wish I could get them to come on the air to be able to talk to them like, "Hey, look, this is how you grew up. What would you rather change?" And I know from speaking from a few of them, they wish they had learned Spanish, that their parents had spoken Spanish at home so they could practice it and not lose it, or always have it. So I was fortunate enough to have both languages, and having the two languages makes it easier to learn more, or learn other languages like German. German is very much like Spanish in terms of word order, sentence structure. La pelota roja, the ball red. In English, you would say the red ball. In Spanish and German, it's the inverse. Also, it's easier for me to learn German because German has masculine, feminine, and neutral articles. So, die, der, das. In Spanish, it's just el and la. So I have to kind of mix English and Spanish when learning German. So it's either masculine, feminine, or the, if that makes any sense. So in English, it would be the for both el and la. But in German, there's el, la, and the, if that makes sense, for the neutral. And then from there, I can just kind of snowball, and I can pick up other languages fairly easily. German, I was conversational. I couldn't write it to save my life, but I was able to have conversations when I would go up to Montreal. German, I just had an idea that I wanted to go to Germany one day, which, of course, it's a tiny country. There's not that many Germans, or at least in my experience, I haven't run into that many German speakers, although Swiss, Netherlands, and I forgot what other country. Is it Swiss? Damn, I can't remember. But there are other countries outside of Germany that speak and understand German as like an unofficial second language. And I've met some when I was in Veracruz in my summers. I'd go to a particular resort. My mother was friends with the manager there, so I'd get in on like an employee pass and just hang out by the pool. And of course, it was weird because Veracruz is more of a European tourist attraction than Americans. The only reason I can think of is that because Veracruz is the oldest city in Mexico, it's 500 years old now. I guess the history of it just being old is what attracts Europeans to Veracruz, because there's not that many tourist attractions other than like taking a bus around the pier, showing the Naval Academy, and a few other things that are unique to Veracruz. Train of thought. I was going somewhere with this. Oh yeah. So at the resort, I would often meet German-speaking Europeans, foreigners, and I would try to speak with them because they didn't understand the Spanish very well, but they had an idea of English. In between English, Spanish, and some German, we kind of figured it out and was like, hey, what are you doing here? What do you like so far? Where are you from? That kind of stuff. And they were kind of shocked because I was an American and I also spoke Spanish, until they realized, oh, my family's from here and I just happen to live in America. Yeah. So with first and second generation Americans, particularly second generation, or the generation that don't end up learning Spanish, their second language, and have very Latino features, dark skin, short, particular hairstyle, or not hairstyle, but hair color, brown eyes, the whole nine. Latin Americans born in Latin America that come over and speak with them have a disdain because they also don't bother to learn the language. Or maybe it's not a care or an inclination to it, because they've fallen into the typical American mindset of just... Actually, can you hear me? I haven't gotten a message. Well, hopefully you hear me. I still got people here, so I guess people can hear me. All right. Damn, what was I talking about? I really need a producer. I need to get big quick. Latin Americans. Oh, animosity. So the animosity is from the few Latin Americans that I've spoken to, which is few. Two of them that I've worked with for an extended period of time. My father hired them to do some work, and they just ended up kind of being half-assed managers or leads whenever we were flipping houses or remodeling houses. The conversations we'd have were a little deeper, getting to know where they were from, what brought them here, why they're here, why they actually put up with living in a small 3-bedroom house with like 20 other males. But the point of this one is that they see it as these kids have all this opportunity in their hands and they can't do anything to make themselves any better, because knowing 2 languages, now they can run or work with the Latinos that come over, teach them, help them, show them a better way, show them how to assimilate quicker. And at the same time, they're too Americanized for the most part, in that they're okay with just being in a bubble that, okay, yeah, there's other countries in the world. Yeah, there's other foods that I could try out, but I'm going to just stick with burgers and pizza and fast food joints and, just stay in the bubble. Lack of awareness, and you might hear stories about stuff like this where Americans will go to a foreign country and then, well, maybe not now with COVID, but I remember hearing as a kid and even as a teenager news reports that Americans get arrested or detained or Essentially, it makes the news that an American makes a big deal that a restaurant in Italy, France, Portugal, Spain, wherever, doesn't have ranch dressing. Like how privileged, how not deserving, entitled. How entitled must someone be to expect to have the comforts from home in another country on a separate continent on another hemisphere? Just makes no sense. Yeah, and again, my point is always just reiterate, hey, we're all human. Let's be friends. Let's get along. Because in the end, that's all we got left. Yeah, we try to identify by our nationality, ethnicity, creed, religion, affiliation, whatever. Like I have so many labels that I could use: sex addict, Texan, Christian, first and second generation immigrant, geek, nerd, all kinds of things. But at the heart of it, I'm human. And it's something that's really difficult for me to break out of, because as a Texan, I see myself as a Texan before I think of myself as an American. A lot of native-born Texans, I would say, feel and think the same way. I'm not Texan, I'm American. And that is more prevalent for myself because I have had experiences where I would meet Japanese, Polacks, Germans, Austrians, Chinese. What else? And this is in a construction work build-out setting where we would have other employees. Most of these were at Tesla, where these employees would be working for a foreign country company that installed or built X, Y, or Z. Like the company is famous for building extruders, which makes plastic injection molding parts, or the machines that make plastic parts. So those were Austrians and Germans. They would come down. Some of them spoke English. Some of them needed a translator. And interacting with them, most foreigners don't like Americans, but they love Texans. I haven't met a nationality from, or a person from another nation outside of the U.S. that's been in the U.S. that doesn't like Texans. They have kind of a chip on their shoulder, or just kind of like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever you say. But whenever it does happen to come up that I'm a Texan, or they see the tattoo on my elbow, they're like, oh, Texas, you Texas? And then they just want to know about the cows and the oil derricks and all this other stuff. So I find that amusing that the world sees Texas as unique, or as its own thing, I guess. Another example of that is also when working in oil and gas plants, doing either remodels or shutdowns or whatever we were doing. A lot of people would be from different states. We would be working in Virginia, but you'd have people from California, all along the southern states, Midwest, everywhere working there. And you'd have a few foreign nationals working there as some type of technician, expert, engineer, whatever. And of course, everybody has their own pissing contest. Oh, my state's better because, we're the home of this. My state's better because we're known for lobster. My state's this because we're known for clam chowder. My state's the best, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, he's not American, right? Everybody agrees this guy's, whatever he is. Give everybody a sheet of paper from my notepad. Everybody's got their own pen or pencil. Draw your state. And I drew a very shitty version of the state of Texas, which I know I have the outline somewhere. I just don't know where I have it. It's probably one of these books back here. But in any case, very bad drawing, poor drawing of the Texas outline. So everybody shows them like, okay, hey, Cheng. I think he was Chinese. I hope he was Chinese, but his name was Cheng, Cheng. What's this? And I point to the sheet, and he looks at it. Square. Point at that one. What's this? Rectangle. What's this? Rectangle with Like he was making a sign of squiggly line, wriggly line, whatever. Crooked line. Okay, what's that? Cake? No, right? What's this? Texas! So he was excited, and everybody's like, "Ah, man, fuck you! You told him." I didn't tell him shit. We were here the whole time. Everybody saw me pulling the paper out, doing that. I didn't pull him aside and say, "Hey, get excited for Texas." When I showed him this one, then he asked, "Who?" Like, Texas, me, and pointed at a few other guys that I knew were from Texas, and then he just loved talking to us ever since then. Up until that point, everybody else, well, even with everyone else, he was still kind of grumpy and matter of fact. But with us, he was more lively. And I'm not saying that Texas is the best state, because we're our own country. Don't know. I'm kidding. The point I'm getting at is that pride is hard for me to let go. And I can understand other people from other states have a difficulty letting go from identifying themselves as their state or even as an American. It's hard to just say, okay, I'm human. I mean, I am human, but it's hard to introduce yourself to someone like, hey, I'm human, blah, 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 or I'm like you. Trying to relate to someone it's kind of difficult because you can't come up to someone and say, hey, I'm a human, so are you, let's be friends. Normally it's more of a dance of making a new friend. And I get that. I get it's an issue. And I have an issue with letting go of my identity or identities as a Texan, as a sex addict, as a Christian, as a biker, as all the other things that I am, and just finding common ground and starting as human and then building up from there. And I just ask that you keep that in mind. Try to reach out to someone new, make a new friend, or reach out to an old friend. And, actually I would want to challenge you to reach out to an old friend that may have done you wrong, or you might have done them wrong. Now, if they fucked your husband or, killed your dog, all right, fine, don't talk to them. But someone that you just kind of lost touch with, they got married, they became super Christian, or you got remarried and, okay, sorry. I need to quit talking with my hands because then the focus changes, but I'll try to keep my hands down low. Whatever life circumstance that changed that someone in your family or friends stopped talking to you or hanging out with you, I just challenge you to reach out to them like, hey, look, whatever is in the past, let's squash it and let's reconnect and work from there. If you want. I'm not going to make you do anything. I can't make you do anything. But I would hope that you would try that. I'm going to do that this week. I'm going to reach out to a family member of my wife's, on my wife's side of the family, the dead one, not the ex-wife. And that whole side of the family, after a spouse passes away, something I've noticed in widow groups is that once the family member is buried, that side of the family just disappears. So your spouse's family ends up just disappearing, or stops contacting you, whatever. Whether it's too painful to see me because I remind them of their daughter or cousin, sister, whatever. Who knows? But I'm going to do that this week. I challenge you guys to try that the same with just anybody. Just a friend. Doesn't have to be someone that died or a family member that died, but just remember that you're human. Be human with other humans, right? And I want to talk about more stuff. Sometimes things come into my mind, and I have to tell myself, don't talk about that now because you need to finish this train of thought. And of course, when I finish it, I don't remember what I was thinking 10, 15 minutes earlier. I'll come up with something soon, hopefully, or else I'll see people click off and then nothing will happen. What's going on? Because I really didn't close up the idea or anything that happened with first and second generation. I feel that I'm unique, even though that I am literally first and second generation. I'm more like a first generation immigrant, the way I was raised, except that I also learned English as I was growing up. So Not that I'm special or better than or more unique or whatever, just that my situation is different. I'm sure there's probably 1 or 2 or 20 other people out there in the world or in the US that had to deal with something similar. And something I want to get you guys to think about, because this whole nationality and identity and ethnicity thing is kind of difficult to wrap your head around. Because per DNA, you can go to Ancestry, do your DNA, and find out that you're X percentage Irish, other percentage Italian, this percentage that, blah, 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 blah. But what defines that? What defines the traits that say, okay, these genes are Italian, these genes are Irish, these genes are that, these genes are the other? Don't tell me you don't hear me. Okay, sorry. I had a friend text me that, yeah, they'll be my producer if I move closer to them. It would be nice to have a producer. But in any case, so I'm going to give you guys an example of how difficult it is to do this whole nationality thing. Because you can be born in one country, raised in another, so which one are you? What your parents are or what you were born as? So here's the example. Male. Wait, can you see my finger? Male. Male. Born and raised in Spain. Female. Born in Italy, raised in Argentina. Okay? Female moves to Portugal, meets male on vacation in Portugal, get married, they move. They have a kid in Puerto Rico, right? Somewhere over here. Wait. Puerto Rico. They have their kid in Puerto Rico. So now they have this little kid. They take that kid and go to Mexico and raise that child. What is the child? I want to play some... I need to make a note to play some Jeopardy music, like when I ask that question. Do, 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 do. It's a trick question. That child is Luis Miguel. He identified as Mexican his whole life, and when it came out that he was actually born in Puerto Rico, he went ahead and started the process to naturalize himself as a Mexican citizen. The controversy over that is that his father presented him as the son, solar, sun and moon, the son of Mexico. And it was alleged that he was born, or they alleged that he was born in Veracruz. So that's why that kind of sticks out, because I spent my summers there. I grew up, I'm close in age to Luis Miguel. I'm not going to out myself, but in any case, so growing up, I was kind of always pissed that, this kid, he's got all these girls chasing him. They want to throw the pussy at him, and he's, similar age to me. I look better than him because when he was like 12 or 15, there's a album cover that he's on that he hates because he looks horrible. Like, no, just very tragic looking. But he's a great looking guy now. And I think all of us had an awkward stage as a kid. But the point of this is, you can't or shouldn't try to define yourself based on your ancestry, because your ancestry, who's to know that you really were there? Actually, here's another point. I have a friend. She was brought up her whole life being told that her grandparents were German. Scratch that. Her grandparents are Swiss and one other one. I want to say Polish. I don't remember. She did an ancestry thing, did a DNA check, and it turns out that her grandparents were actually German. There are, from World War I, Germans would be embarrassed to say no, that's what it was. They said they were Irish. I remember. Let's call them back. Anyways, or not Irish, Welsh. Welsh? It's in the UK. I don't think it's Ireland. I want to say Welsh. I got to double check the stats, but yeah. Trying Turns out that she was actually German, not Welsh or Swiss, as she was told, because Germans from World War I were embarrassed or had that stigma of being German, so they would say they were Welsh, because who knows what a Welsh accent really sounds like. Especially back then, it's not like you can go online and like, hang on, let me go on YouTube, see what a Welsh person sounds like when they speak English. There's nothing remotely like that. So, okay, you're Welsh. You kind of sound German. Oh, no, right? Or they would say they were Swiss, because Swiss would also, Swiss language is Swiss, they speak, or sorry, in Switzerland, it's Swiss, German, and French are spoken there, depending on where you are. Train of thought. So yeah, she grew up her whole life thinking that she was Swiss, Welsh, and other things that are in her family. Damn it! I need to quit moving my hands. Sorry. Out of focus on the camera. In any case, the friend was kind of distraught, and she was like, oh shit, well, I want to know more. I want to go down this rabbit hole. And I kind of got after her. I was like, okay, I get, you were lied to for most of your life, but was it really your parents that lied to you, or was it your grandparents that lied to your parents and they just parroted what they were told? And what does it matter if you're Welsh or German or whatever else, all the other mixed things that are in there? And I get her point that she said that, getting to know her identity, getting to know who she is. On the flip side of that, I told her, okay, you know who you are now, right? You are you. It doesn't matter if they were Pole or Czech or Russian or whatever they were, or Chinese. None of that's going to help you get a job. None of that is going to help you get a loan. It's not going to hinder you from anything in your life now, right? Yeah, it's important to know your heritage, your history, I think. But, your identity, you choose your identity, not your birth, not where you were raised, not what your parents are, right? You can choose that. Especially now with the whole, I'm going to leave that topic alone, because that's going to be a rabbit hole. And I don't want to spend an hour trying to justify that. But choosing who you are, who your identity is, doesn't have to be, oh, I'm, a rabbit, or I'm, I'm going to identify as 65 so I can get the Denny's blue plate special. No, I'm talking about your identity of who you are is based on your own experiences. So you can define that. You can choose to have different experiences. You can choose to do more or less than whatever is going on in your life. And if you're watching here, you're American or Canadian. If you want to say, okay, yeah, I'm Mexican American, I'm German American, I'm whatever, that's fine as well. But in the end, you're still American. Well, in the end, you're still human. But you shouldn't stress about the past. And of course, I'm saying that from a point that I know, yeah, my grandparents are from Mexico. I always forget where my father's parents were from. I want to say either Jalisco or Guanajuato. I know it's southwest Mexico. I just don't remember where. And I've never bothered to go and find out, because I don't have a connection there. My connection is with the family that's still alive. So I talk to them. I hang out with them. In any case, I hope all of this jumbled nonsense made some kind of sense to you. I'm glad that the audio is finally working this time. I need to remember to make sure the settings are set and remember what they are. Thanks for making it this far. Thanks for watching this in my crazy rant. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, besos.